Welcome, everybody. Another great episode with my friends here, Saul Klein, John Reilly. We're all envious of John every week
Mhm.
because he's in Hawaii and he's two hours behind us too. So, welcome, everybody.
Yeah, John just had breakfast, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, a, a little bagel in your honor, Saul.
Ah, good.
that's so good, guys. There's more news. Remember when we all started this? It was the whole NAR settlement. Well, it's not over. What the hell's
Well,
happening? Who wants to fill me in on what's happening?
yeah, we said we're going to run out of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, yeah. John's
And,
left.
and at some point, we were going to talk about the end-to-end transaction, with what was happening. Well, that was 2 years ago. We were going to do it. But I'll tell you,
Mhm.
that's one of the things that's happening now, the end-to-end transaction.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Saul, and kick it off
Well, yeah,
because
so
we
so
have a
there's
lot on the agenda.
there's so many things that are going on, and we believe that the more you know about what's happening in the industry, the more knowledgeable you are about your business, the more
Yeah.
you're going to be able to demonstrate expertise to buyers and sellers. And demonstrating expertise is one of the ways you build trust and confidence. And the currency in the real estate business really is trust and confidence. You want people to feel confident in your ability in the business to transact and to represent them as their fiduciary. And you want people to know that you know more than a lot of folks that have real estate licenses, that you're up to speed on what's going on because consumers have access to a lot of this information today. They didn't have it when, years ago when I was selling real estate, but today everybody has access to the bits and pieces. And so the
Yep.
more that you can provide to people, the better. And now there's so much stuff that it's really kind of confusing. So I think that we ought to just kind of go over and refresh people about the basics
Yep.
and let you know that you can ask us questions anytime. You can communicate with us. You can go to the data advocate. We'll post our notes up there. But don't ever expect to know it all because it's right now in particular, there's a lot of potential paradigm shifting taking place from
There are.
acquisition to litigation, just so many things, huh?
Dude, I was just on the phone. Oh, you just brought something up. I was just on, before we fully get into this, I was on the phone with Zillow, with a Zillow rep who's in charge of a massive region, all the Northeast. And the reason is because he was helping us out. Well, you guys tell me. You guys know what's happening in Chicago with the MLS, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you know where the MLS is now. If things don't work out in the next couple of weeks, Zillow's going to cut off that feed. So none of the MLS listings are going to show up on Zillow. And we, as a brokerage, just opened in Chicago. And we don't want that happening because we're brand new. So I was on the phone with Zillow and he told me, he just sent us a contract saying, hey, look, you don't have to worry about it. We circumvent the MLS. If it happens, it looks like it's going to happen, where we just have a link. And as soon as it cuts, all of your listings go directly into Zillow. So you don't have an issue with that, which I found interesting. I'm like, well, are they going to do that everywhere else? Like,
Well, so that's part of what's happening right now.
yeah,
So you talk about Chicago and it's MLS and it's like the big MLS in Chicago. They created something similar to a private listing network.
yeah, yeah.
And of course, Zillow has stepped out to ensure that, or at least to the best of their ability, ensure that people don't keep their listings from public view. And of course, that is in Zillow's self-interest because people come to their site to look at listings. And if people start to keep their listings off-site, or if MLSs don't send their listings, right? And this also kind of trails into clear cooperation policy. So yeah, Tristan, you bring up one of these lawsuits, and potential for a change in the industry is private listing networks or even MLS private networks, and the holding back of listings from public display. And what is Zillow going to do about that? Because they came out as a proponent for clear cooperation. But you have lots of other things that have taken place since then that can
Yeah.
really kind of cloud this issue. And that was part of the story that John sent you today on from Rob Hahn, which
Yeah,
has
guys.
reviewed a number of these things. But private listing networks, PLN, something NAR said about if a private listing network does comply with CCP, how will that affect this litigation in Chicago or Zillow and what they're doing? And overall, what will happen? And you throw into this mix the Compass Anywhere acquisition, and it
Hmm.
used to be one of the reasons that MLSs were viable is because brokers couldn't create an MLS or a tech stack on their own.
And now,
And now the big guys have the capability to do that. And so now
yeah,
there's even a question about the MLS. I still believe the MLS is just this great single source of truth.
yep,
We
yep.
know how to handle data, and any of the big guys really should affiliate with an MLS, but you could see some of the big market players who have what we refer to as a critical mass of listings pull
I
back.
have a, I have a question for both of you on that specifically before we move on to the next piece. On Compass and um, just the private listing network. Now that the merger officially went through, now we're dealing with a company that has 340,000 agents. They have the tech stack, which they didn't before because I felt like they just weren't communicating with each other from company to company. Now they're going to solve for that. And the concern that I see, and then you tell me, right? Because people are like, why are you concerned? Just let them be. Well, I'm like, of course, I can't do anything about it. Of course, I'm going to let them be, right? But my concern is that they now have a lot more weight to push around if they want to be part of NAR or not, if they want to go after Zillow even further, right? If they want to deal with local MLSs because they own over 60% of listings in one metro area. I don't know. But that's a lot of weight to push around. Like that to me could create a problem against what you just called Saul, the whole MLS, that that works and it's worked and Europe wants it. We have it, but I don't know that we may have it the same way 2 years from now. What are our challenges?
Yeah, so just to kind of put the numbers in perspective, if there are 1.5 million realtors, and of
Hmm.
course, realtors aren't all the licensees, but let's say there are 1.5 million realtors, and the new conglomerate Compass Anywhere has 360, then what percentage of the market do they have? What percentage of the listings do they have? What percentage of the listings in your market are sold in-house? And still, depends on the marketplace, it might be more beneficial and easier, particularly in a market that's declining as opposed to accelerating, to sell the listing for a better price because you only have, no matter how big you are, you still are only 25, 30% of the market. And those other agents sell your listings.
That's right.
And so the numbers are, they're big numbers, but I'm not sure it spells doom and gloom for MLS. And while they have built their own tech stack, there still is there's still quite a bit to maintaining a clean database of listing information. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of institutional knowledge behind knowing how to do that.
Do you think, John or Saul, do you think we go more towards having it being okay now to have a lot more private listing networks? Because I feel like we're going to go more towards being fragmented than we are being unified, at least at the initial inception of taking a listing.
Yeah, I think you're going to see more of the private uh, listing networks, and today there was an announcement that to me was fairly breaking news where, since 2020, there's been a dispute about private listing services with the top agent network, and they've been back and forth with NAR. But just today, there's basically a settlement, and uh, top uh, agent network got the okay to continue with their practice of having uh, a private network for listings that will not be deemed by NAR under the clear cooperation policy to be public marketing. So that's going to open the door for some of these private networks to go ahead and display their listings and eventually not be in violation of the uh, clear cooperation policy. And this was announced by the general counsel for NAR, where they said, okay, we're not going to fight this lawsuit any longer,
Mm.
and we won't deem you to be uh, in violation of the CCP.
Okay, on that, because remember, guys, I sent you, I think it was last week. I'm checking my text. I sent you guys the state of Washington legislation.
Yes.
And that showcased that it looked like they're going to go after anything that goes into a private setting. They want everything listed as a state. It's saying that it looks like it's going to be a disservice to the state of Washington, to the consumer, if they're going to be fragmented. What do you guys think of that? Is that
But
is
yeah.
that what's going to happen in every state?
Well, that was real interesting. So there's a little history people need to be familiar with, and that's of course the big giant MLS up in Washington is Northwest MLS.
Yep.
And Northwest MLS has been very effectively run for many years. The previous CEO, very experienced, and the current CEO, very
Mm.
experienced. And what what Northwest MLS has done is worked with the state with the state government to make sure that the things they were doing to keep in place their rules were in fact supported by legislation. And so what they don't want, what Northwest MLS doesn't want, are listings being withheld from the MLS, private
Listen, it makes
exclusives.
sense
They
to me.
right. So what they've done is and I don't think there's actually a specific piece of legislation yet, but they've proposed that the
Hmm.
state say, you know what, we're going to almost make putting it in the MLS the law, that it's in the best interest of buyers, it's in the best interest of sellers. It minimizes the chance for discrimination and for exclusivity and fair housing. And so, based on these general principles, to then say, and of course, Northwest MLS is in litigation with Zillow.
Yeah, they are, which is interesting.
Well,
I'm
and they're in
like
litigation with Compass, right?
Compass too. Yeah.
I think it was, I know with Compass, right? Because Compass wants to withhold listings.
Yep.
And so, what's one way, if you're big enough, to fight that? And that's to go to the
Well,
legislature.
in Washington, it's a class action lawsuit brought by the attorneys that did the NAR thing, and they were the ones that threw in the civil RICO violations. But I think since then they've pulled back on that. But that's a whole different lawsuit going against them.
Yeah.
But
You,
I think,
you,
go ahead.
the bill you were talking about is only a draft form, but
Yes.
the basic statement of it is that those brokers who currently use private listing networks can continue to do so so long as the property is also marketed publicly. In other words, it's not banning the private networks, but it's saying, in addition, you have to still publish it publicly. And that's the essence of the bill they're trying up there. But it's
Yeah.
in draft form.
Listen, yeah, draft form, good. And I don't have a problem if Compass and obviously we all agree on this, so it's a lot easier to talk to you guys on this. But I don't have a problem if Compass has a place for all of their private listings as long as it's open to everybody. Because then the thing that evens out the playing field is ChatGPT. I can be like, hey, go to Compass, go to Zillow, go to wherever, grab all the listings, show me all the listings. That just evened out the playing field. It's like we have the MLS back, right? It's when you hide it behind something that nobody has access to, that creates a problem for that brand new agent, brand new independent broker. All of a sudden, it starts feeling like a monopoly because it's those big companies that can dominate and not give the little companies the ability to grow. And that's not a healthy environment.
Yeah, so this idea of uh, a private network being exclusive, well, that by its very nature is exclusive, right? Exclusive.
Yes.
And then how do you determine and how is that worked out? So, but you reminded me of something. When I started selling real estate, the year was 1975, and we didn't have an internet, and the listings never went public. They're all in the MLS. That's
Yeah.
where you went to find information about properties for sale. Is you
Mm.
went into the MLS, and there was no public place to go. There was no place, right, where the listings were displayed. And the only people that really knew what the inventory was were people that were members of the MLS. Well, the internet kind of changed all that. And now listings can be found everywhere. And they're really like a commodity, right? They're everywhere. And so how they get there is the question, and how do then brokers compete in different ways? And of course, brokers have always competed. And one of the ways to compete might be I've got inventory that you don't have. And that's why
Hmm.
the legislators might look and say, well, that's not transparent enough for today's consumer world.
Yeah.
And we need to be more transparent. People need to see, they need to be able to judge value better. And, but the bigger players, if they've got the resources to and enough market share, and then you have to consider too, if like say a company like Compass does it, then another big company is going to probably do it just to be competitive. And so you
That's
might
it.
end up with four or five in a marketplace where the bulk of it is found. Now, how do you differentiate yourself if you're a small broker? You're going to need access to all
Yeah.
those listings, right? And you're going to want
Yeah.
exposure. And
That's
so
it.
all this litigation is going to potentially, and we say this all the time, and I say all the time, I mean, like the last 40 years, is going to change the industry. And there's potential because there's so many things going on that could change the industry. And
Yeah.
it's from litigation to acquisitions to consolidations. All of these things are happening, and they're all kind of tied together one way or another. So we said this: Compass is involved in litigation, Zillow is involved in litigation, MLSs are involved in litigation.
You know, you made me think of something on this one, guys. As we're talking about all this litigation, um, where we saw NAR, the whole beginning of this, I guess, right? Which is the NAR versus Sitzer Burnett. Is
Sitzer
that the one?
Burnett.
Yeah. Which I want to get to right now, but the beginning of that, I think what you started seeing is these other companies, Zillow, you start seeing Compass and other ones realizing this is just my personal view, so don't get mad at me. Uh, um, you started seeing how NAR was handling the situation, and to me, they handled it super, super bad, right? I instantly saw holes. And as a corporation that didn't agree with NAR, I'd be like, "Oh, they're not as they're not as great as I thought. Let's go after them. Let's change things to how we want them because it seems to be like it's going to be easier than we thought because they don't actually know what they're doing." That's what other companies see because if you're looking at the book by Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power, it's like, wait a second. People are always trying to one up somebody else. This is why when I look at Compass, it's like, yeah, you're watching out for your agents, but what's the real thing happening here, right? Who's benefiting long term over this? This is why you go after the weaker companies. And that's what I think happened. Because then we started seeing a whole bunch of shit happen after that. Um,
I would add, and the way I looked at this was Sitzer Burnett was determined based on per se method of judgment, which meant that they deemed, like, before they even got into this, they the court deemed that the violation was a violation, and they weren't even going to dispute whether or not it was a violation. They're just going to dispute the damage. So there really, in my mind, wasn't a whole lot that NAR could do at that point in time because this thing was judged per se. Now, once it got to the settlement discussions, that's where I think people could argue that NAR could have done better. And the other thing might be, or that the plaintiff's attorneys could have done worse uh, because of the way that the settlement turned out, with certain major brokers being excluded from the settlement.
well,
Right.
also,
And so
like,
the NAR didn't negotiate on behalf of some of these larger brokers. And so from that perspective, I think you can find fault, at least from where I sit. But when it comes to the court proceed, once they decided it was per se,
yeah,
which touches on one of these other lawsuits that we were talking about, once they decide it's
yeah.
per se, it's like game over.
Well, partially because here's what's baffling to me, and John or Saul. It took an attorney outside of what's going on to figure out something so damn simple, which is happening right now. Not that it's going to cause any major thing, but you know what it tells me? It tells me the attorneys we had at NAR sucked ass in comparison to who we could have had. Because if some other attorney from Buffalo, Tanya, whatever her name is figuring something out and taking the time to do this, and she's not even on this damn case, like where did we go wrong in hiring the right strong individuals to represent us? Because that's what everybody else is looking at, saying massive failure.
I don't know that the attorneys they hired were the wrong attorneys. I don't know that the judge wasn't the wrong judge.
It just was. I know what you're saying. It is what it is. John, where are we at with this weird situation that we've got with January 13th, the whole Rob Hahn situation that you here, I'm gonna pop it up here because these are your words. With up here, what we got? What do we have right here? Any update on the Zillow Compass situation?
Well, I was reading Rob's post. He was the one who first noted that the NAR Council came back and regarding clear cooperation policy and the dispute they were having with the top agent network, they basically wanted to avoid further antitrust litigation and the expenses. So they basically gave in and said to top agent that how you are going to be displaying the listings is not going to be deemed to be public marketing and thus won't be violating the CCP. And I think Rob points out that this could be the demise of the CCP policy, over the maybe not immediately, but it's going to take a little time. And speaking of time, there was another recent one with NAR where this refers to the disclosure of referral fees. The general body of NAR basically said, yeah, we think that now's the time to make that disclosure. But then that was reversed by I think, the executive committee or the delegate committee of
Delegate.
NAR for further study. That was another situation in which everybody was in agreement about disclosure, but they had to put it off now for further discussion. And I think that's the type of action that they need more immediate action and not kind
Yeah.
of reverse it. So,
When you
Yeah.
get the covers on that one, though, John, I think it was the delegate body, the vote wasn't that far off, and they thought there were some things that they needed to iron out. Of course, that's always the case, it seems, in NAR. They kick the ball down the road. But it seemed like a legitimate um, holding back on that. But when
mhm.
you think about that, you bring up this whole area of referral fees not being disclosed. And again, when I sold real estate, you never disclosed referral fees. And the question is, should they be disclosed? And if they should they find their way into the code of ethics? Should they find their way into law? Is it necessary for there to be disclosure of referral fees? And, at least to me, it makes sense that they probably should be. And but that still needs to be worked out, right? And then that leads us to this concept of one of these lawsuits against Zillow, where Zillow's recommendation, or where Zillow's lending program is coming under fire because supposedly those people who send their leads, their buyers to Zillow to get a loan and to Zillow loans, they get the better leads. They
Yeah.
get right, and if they get the better leads, is that not a violation of RESPA? And right, so that's
That's the problem.
kind of that conversation too, right? About hey, if you're a Zillow agent or in the Zillow program, and you put people through the Zillow loan pipeline without referring or giving them an opportunity to go get a lender somewhere else, and
Mhm.
you do get something in return. It might not be a referral fee in money, but it's definitely something of value, leads, better leads. And then is that in itself a violation of RESPA? So that's another one of these lawsuits that we're looking at.
And
Yep. Yep.
I think that particular lawsuit was the Armstrong versus Zillow Group, which was consolidated in another one, the Taylor case, which also was involving RESPA. But beyond RESPA, what I was interested in, it raises the question of breach of fiduciary duties of the brokers involved. Those are the brokers participating in these flex programs or other programs where there are the RESPA ones, is they are not acting in the best interest of their client. They are doing things that benefit the agent, but don't
Mm,
benefit necessarily the consumer. And that's a
yeah.
fiduciary obligation. And of course, brokers are going to be vicariously liable for the fiduciary breaches of their agents. So to me, that's a really big sub issue of the Armstrong versus Zillow case.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you. Um, Two more quick questions before we end for both of you. One is, as I'm listening to you guys, I'm watching, I think we're all watching the possible deconstruction of what the MLS looks like. Like if I feel like there's a power shift. To quote Saul and the book that he recommended me many years ago, there's a paradigm shift. Uh, and I think it's the beginning of us watching that shift now go to corporations and almost the MLS being like just some backlinks with some data, not full data anymore. And I think that's what real estate agents that are out there working, we're doing our thing daily, we're missing that part because again, like what you guys said in previous ones, we we have to go and hunt daily or we don't win, right? We're in the sales business. We have to worry about right now. So it's so tough for us to see 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. But I think it's so important what's happening now because it's just going to take the power away from a central location and give it to these corporations. And then they're going to decide what they do with that data. That's the fear that I have. What do you guys see there?
Well, so I will say, as somebody who's the CEO of an MLS, that what I'm doing is looking for alternative ways to bring value to the MLS. And
Hmm.
if that means and that I need to talk to the bigger players about the value of MLS and why I can bring value to what they're doing. And can even, if I have the right tools and the right players, that I can actually flip the current model of MLS. And when
Mm-hmm.
I say flip the model, the way that MLS works, it's a subscription business. So people have to pay for their content to be available on the internet. And that's not the way the internet works. Typically, you get paid for your content on the internet. But what if we could flip the
Mm-hmm.
model? What if we could find opportunities, and there are many, many opportunities to monetize the data. Of course, you can't do it unless you have a big footprint. So it's not like one party is big enough to do this on their own. And what if we could find avenues to revenue where we could start to minimize the an MLS's having to depend upon subscription revenue, and we could generate revenue through other means. And maybe someday, Tristan, when you put your listing in my MLS, I'll pay you for it. And
That would
maybe if
be
you
nice.
fill out the
I mean,
10,
at that point, you're doing two things. You're attracting me back because you're incentivizing me, right? And you're re-strengthening the MLS because it's all numbers.
well, and so a lot of times agents they don't want to put in more data. But what if I said, well, got to put in a minimal amount of data, otherwise people can't search for your property effectively. But the
Yeah.
more data that you put in, the more effective the search is going to be. And then if I could take that data, there's a lot of information that would be of value for companies if they had access to it that sits in an MLS and is not monetized. And as long as we could find customers for that data that don't impede the practice of the agent. What if I say you fill out 10 fields and you put your listing in our MLS, but if you fill out 100 fields, I'll pay you. And if you fill out
Yeah. Well,
102 fields, I'll pay you
that's
more. And
interesting.
that without being mandatory, I can gather more data. More data is more value, and maybe part of the compensation structure of the broker of the future
You know
is
what
the
happens?
data that they collect.
Hold on. So I just thought of a business before you create that business. So there would probably be somebody who would be like, hey, you know what? I built this AI tool. You can go ahead and use it. And all you have to do is give me 10% of everything you're making, and you can use my tool. And then all of a sudden, we're aggregating for people and we're getting paid too. So listen,
Yeah.
we're in a world where we can make this happen. We just have to have MLSs work together before they lose it. They lose all the power or majority of power.
So if you think about this, with all that data that we can attract, that we can massage, that we can disseminate via API instead of the old way through RETS, Real Estate Transaction Standard,
Yeah.
and that there is a new world for MLSs. So
Yes.
as Mark Twain said, and as I put in one of the papers I wrote on MLS back in 2008, the rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated.
I like that. All right. Last thing. I know we went over. Either one of you. Ah, damn it. Okay, so the Trump administration, they've got the majority politically. This the Department of Justice just rubber stamped the Compass Anywhere merger, right? Obviously, when you read the details, it looks kind of fishy, right? At least from my end. When when and if we're looking in November, now we're in 2027. If that start shifting over politically to a right now it isn't it's Republican led, more Democratic led, right? Either one, Democrats, Republican. Does that change anything where now somebody may bring up antitrust and be like, hey guys, this got rubber stamped. Let me take a look. Let's go through what happened here. This is not right. John, is that a possibility in the future?
Well, I took a quick look at it, and I saw that the acquisition did not have much of a flavor of antitrust. It was an asset acquisition,
Okay.
as compared to the other one where Redfin and Mr. Cooper were all part. part of the network that's now going to be controlled by Rocket, that had more of a flavor of potential antitrust control. And so that's kind of my initial. I guess the DOJ did not see grounds for an investigation based on it. It was just an asset acquisition.
That's just the naming of it, but in all reality, if we're going back to our conversation 10 minutes ago, right? Let's get real.
Mm-hmm.
This changes the way the MLS functions if we fast forward 2, 3 years from now, right? How does that change the world for the consumer, right?
So I think I'm not so sure that this necessarily eliminates MLSs, but here's what I think is really important to keep in mind, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent. Real estate is not affordable anymore.
Oh, that's for
So
sure.
what people are looking for, be they Democrat, Republican, or independent, are
Yeah.
paths to affordability,
How do we get there?
right? And so maybe people are saying, if you have a cradle to grave situation and you can pull some of the costs out of the loan process, because what's the average cost of a loan over the life of a loan? It's like $11,000 or something, which I know is not a tremendous amount, but it's something. So maybe some of the thinking is maybe some of this consolidation makes things more affordable. And that doesn't have any political, in my mind, any political shadow to it. Everybody wants more affordability. We all want more affordability. And so,
Yep.
if letting entities come together, if in fact it can bring down costs overall, and I'm not talking about real estate agent commissions, I'm
Yeah.
talking, look at the cost of escrow. Isn't it? I mean, it's like crazy in some cases when I look at it. Look at the cost of title insurance. Look at the,
Yeah, I see what you're
right? Look
saying.
at so there's a lot of cost maybe that can be squeezed out if you can consolidate. And so I'm not sure that changing political control necessarily at this point changes the trend to allow people to come in and consolidate to see if they can't reduce costs.
All right, I like it. Listen, I feel like we're never going to stop talking about the news, which is a beautiful thing. Real estate news. Uh, I feel unfinished, but we'll keep going, guys. A lot of stuff's going to happen. Thanks for being on. Thanks for helping me understand the market better. I appreciate that. And
Always
everybody
glad to
else
see it.
tuning in, thank you so much. Lisa, Jerry, John, all right, go back to the warm waters of Hawaii and go grab a mango for us.
The surf's up.
Surf's up.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Bye.